Hello and good day. Welcome to the Deep End, where we look at those things and processes that life and consciousness cannot do without, those pieces that are integral. And today, we're going to ask a simple question: what makes us human? You know, that's been a question for human beings for quite a while, and originally they said, well, we make tools, that's what makes us different. And then we watch chimpanzees create tools out of branches to get ants. And when I went this week to an American Scientific American article, it's like they're beating in on the genome that changed everything. Our closest relative, the chimpanzee, we share 99% of the same genes as they do. And in that 1%, that difference makes all the difference in the world. And we're not real sure what it is. And I'll be honest, I read a couple articles on it. I got a little confused. The HAR1 genome is definitely an address that matters. But that's not what really we can talk about, unless you want to get into biochemistry, and I'm not the guy to do that, believe me. My biochem, I have to keep going back to those books. But what we can say is something happened, and it has to do with brain size. So does brain size make us human? No, it does not. There are other animals with bigger brains. However, the body relationship to the brain size is quite different. But something happened in the prefrontal brain, the cerebral cortex, and everything began to change. And maybe one of the things that changed that make us human is the evolution of their larynx, the voice box that allowed speech and language to happen by vocalizing. And we've talked about the first question probably being, where are you? You know, foraging through the forest and keeping track of each other. And of course, other things that add into this, the opposable thumb, our uprightness, our being a biped. You know, in this biped uprightness, there's a hairless piece that happens. We don't have any body hair, and this changed everything for child rearing. Think about it. The most vulnerable person on the savannah, or animal on the savannah, was a pregnant biped. Think about up until human beings and all, the baby would be born and would attach itself onto the mother's, would hold on to the mom. But once you become hairless, moms have to cling to the child and not the child that clings to the mom. The whole direction of care starts changing. Another thing that makes us different is creativity and art, our ability to tell stories, to imagine a future. Did you know we're one of the only animals that actually shed tears? There's this emotional piece. And all of these things seem to come together in a unique way. And it adds up in my mind to something that Margaret Mead learned in anthropology. In studying the graves of ancient, prehistoric people, what she learned was that there were many who had broken bones, broken legs and arms that had healed. Somehow the social group cared for the other, and they nurse them back to health. Because when you have a broken leg, you can't hunt, you can't forage, you're stuck in the village. And I think this points to something that is integral to us being human. It's not one thing. It's not speech and language. It's not bipedalism. It's not our nakedness or our tears or even our imagination. It's something having to do with empathy and compassion. And, in studies, this was an interesting sidebar in my study this week. Mice have empathy. Other animals have empathy, but there's something in the human condition that changed us and caused us to actually care. And, I'll be honest, this week I read across some researchers that say nature didn't make us human, but culture did. Nature set us up to become a breakaway species, if you will. At least it looks that way. no longer dependent on our genetic programming, but free to create a whole new world on top of nature while using nature to build and understand a new order. And that's what we've done. Look at our cities. I always say the East Coast is a megalopolis. It's one big piece of concrete at this point, from New York City all the way down to Miami. It's an amazing event what humans have done. When I watch ants after a rain and they get rained out, they just start building right away. And I think of the history of Japan. Every time they've been destroyed many times, the last time by human beings, they just start building right away. So do we. There's something in us that makes us human. And in my mind, it really does have to do with this empathic connection that causes us to actually experience another being's pain and joy and sorrows and love. And I think that that's part of what storytelling is about. That's part of what makes us human, is it lets us in on each other. Now, I just laid out a bunch of stuff. There's a lot of debate still going on in this. The Genome Project is amazing when you dig into that. So I'll go with you first. Our co-hosts today are Bob Hayes from Florida and Marianne Rudis. She's from Spokane Valley. Again, I'm Red Hawk, and I am from Spokane, Washington. Bob, what say you on this, what makes us human?
You've mentioned a lot of different things that have to do with how we're human. But the one thing you didn't mention, and the one thing that ties them all together, is that human beings are the only species that are able to understand and manipulate symbols. All other animals deal on signs. What that means is they deal with something that's concrete right there in front of them. But humans are able to abstract. Humans are able to think of something about what's in front of them that is removed from that event. They can think about, I want to build a house. I don't have a house yet, but I know what a house is. And all of language is based on symbol. Empathy is based on symbol. Empathy is the ability to abstract and begin to look at a conception of that other individual that we're empathizing with. And in fact, our understanding of ourselves as unique beings, our self-awareness, is a symbol. It's a symbol for something that we build up during our lifetime to identify as what we call ourself. So all of those other things, the genome and the use of language, all of these, the opposable thumb, all of those are necessary but not sufficient. They get us to the point where we can step outside of our physical body, our physical place and time, and deal symbolically and deal with something that is beyond our immediate environment.
Amen.
And that is what makes us human.
And I think that, if I'm in my studio in my basement and I looked around and there's some dead flowers that are very, very nice, but everything is built out of an abstracted thought at somewhere. So, all of this is the fruit. My board, my lights, my drums, my instruments, all the stuff we're using to do this podcast. So, that symbolic piece, man. And now we're back to the prefrontal lobe. And what business is it up to, let us ask. Marianne, what say you on this?
Well, I think, my mind kind of goes to, we think of human beings and then we think of the animal world, right? And it's almost like embedded in this question, what separates us from that? And yet the animal world is not one thing. It's a diverse set of other species. And not all of them are the same. You mentioned the chimpanzees. There are elephants, there are whales, there are all these other species. And so human beings, for me, we did grow out of nature. And I kind of liked the reference you made that culture is what makes us human, or culture is what sets us apart, because we did kind of grow out of nature, and we're a part of it. And we've spent many years separating ourselves from it. And so what is it? And Bob, I love what you said about the symbols and the abstractions. You know, is that an evolutionary process of our species? Are there other species that may evolve? We've seen whales grieve. We've seen elephants grieve. We see empathy and emotion, or what I would kind of identify as emotion, come out of other species. So I guess what makes us human, for me, I kind of twist that question a little bit to what does it actually mean to be human? And so what is it that we as a species are aiming for? Where are we going? And that might be what sets us apart, makes us different, is that we have these aspirations, we have these ideas, we have symbols, we have abstractions, we have self-awareness, some of us. And, so I kind of think that it's a tough question to answer. I don't know that there's any one thing that makes us, that defines us as what it means to be a human being, other than we're in this together and we can communicate and we've got to live together. So let's figure this out, right?
Well, and I think that, the whole concept of where we're going is a key indicator of who we are and what kind of future do we imagine. And I think that's all good and stuff to address, but it also is an indicator of who we are coming up with those particular futures and being able to communicate them in such a way that people can make at least a somewhat intentional decision of that's not the future I want, or this is the future I want. And I think that's the big challenge of democracies, because the people have to sign off in a large way to a certain narrative, a certain story. And again, stories, to me, language is symbolic. It's just amazing watching a child come into language and use that language in a way, trying out new words. I know my grandson, the word destination, man, he just, when Siri was telling us, you have arrived at your destination. What is a destination? And the way he plugged that in and created a symbolic place within his context of meaning, so that he had that he could hold that and use his larynx and his tongue and his mouth to say the word. All of those, to me, are amazing. And, again, elephants, mice, they all have empathy. Whales have huge empathy. We know that. However, the opposable thumb. I
was saying I'm not so sure that they do. I think we may be anthropomorphizing when we see that. They have emotion. They have that part of the brain that deals with emotion. But when we start labeling those emotions with emotions that humans have, then we're anthropomorphizing elephants and whales.
I'm not going to go into it, but I read 3 or 4 studies this week of just about mice and other animals and how they showed that they that the correct word was empathy. Now, that's debatable for sure. And
everything is debatable.
Yeah, well, and I want us to say that the deep end, we don't pull on threads that are grounded anywhere specifically where we can say this is it, and then we can defend it. That's not what the deep end is about. It's about pulling on threads that the human family has been entertaining and struggling over, and there is no definitive answer to this. However, from my perspective, that those studies that Margaret Mead did, where it showed how the human beings cared, a people, a tribe, whatever you want to call it, cared for someone and took care of them while they were not of any utility to the group other than a liability. That says something to me that is uniquely human. And with all the symbolic stuff that around that, with all the rituals that are around that, because a lot of these people, when they found their graves, they were buried with food and weapons and symbolic things like drums and rattles that had some meaning, probably related to dance. I would imagine, because I love imagining. So there's something in that place when you put all the symbolic stuff together, all the others, that is happening. And whatever that is to me is uniquely human. When I think of how, if there's intelligent and self-aware life on other planets, will they put it together this way? And if not, and they come here, we're in deep doo-doo.
But again, I think it's that ability to abstract. You use terms like meaning, you use terms like empathy and so forth. All of those are abstractions. All of those are based upon our ability to move outside of the immediate situation. And the reason why they were fixing a broken bone was because they could think of well, this is my brother, this is my sister. In the future, which is an abstraction, that bone will heal, and that person will then be able to get back and be of utility to the group.
Exactly.
So again, it's that ability to move outside of the immediate situation and think in symbolic terms, which is what language allows us to do. And there's a danger, though. This is that two-sided coin again. It's when the symbol comes back and starts biting us that we're in danger. When we put too much into a given symbol or into our relationship with that symbol, then you get into dogma and you get into all sorts of things that then come back, and we don't realize what's happening. The symbols are then affecting us as opposed to us using the symbols.
Well, and I think
so do you mean like...
Go ahead, Marianne.
Well, I was going to say, so it makes it more of a concrete thing, and it becomes a thing. Because as we were talking, the word that just keeps coming into my mind is imagination. And so maybe that is our ability to imagine is something that's unique. And once you start to your point about the symbols becoming something that's controlling us, it's no longer something we imagine. It's something we've defined, and it becomes a concrete thing. And so it becomes static and stuck. Where imagination, where it keeps moving and it's changing and it's always growing. I don't know. That's kind of what I thought.
And there's two things that come in as you guys talk. One is what makes us human is the ability to have a future and to see a future and to change it. The second is we're all going to die. And death ends up playing a huge piece. Now, another part of the human being, and this is what Carl Jung talked about, was that all this stuff bundles up and has an underbelly called darkness, called the shadow. If we look at, in 1939, Carl Jung gave a speech basically saying, hey, the world wants war. There's no way we're going to avoid war. It wants it. Look what's going on around you. What did Jesus say? How come you can see a cloud coming in and you say, yeah, it's going to rain, but you can't see the other stuff, gathering around you? The whole world right now wants war. America wants war against itself. In that sense, it's an amazing thing. And this is also what makes us human. I just watched a 2-hour special on the atomic bomb and Oppenheimer, which was excellent. If you haven't seen it, go to History Channel and watch it. It's beautiful because it gets into human flesh, human beings creating something, and the process of creating it, knowing that once they create it, and they better get to it first before the Germans get to it. Once we get to it, it changes the whole planet immediately. By the way, 2 days ago on the 16th was the anniversary of the first atomic bomb being set off at Los Alamos. And I think it's important for us to understand this aspect of what makes us human as well. And this is part of what I think modern depth psychology is trying to somehow address, this darkness, so that we can talk about it before it gets a foothold in time and causes us to destroy ourselves. You know, did you know the hydrogen bomb is literally over 1,000 times more powerful than the bombs dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima? 1,000 times. You take an inch, and now you go 1,000 inches. That's the difference of destruction. And these things are all over the place. So I'm going to say atomic bombs, also what makes us human.
Absolutely. And I find it very, very interesting that the first thing that Oppenheimer quoted after the atomic bomb went off was the Rig Veda, which is the oldest symbolic statement that humanity produced when he said, "I am death."
Vishnu, yeah, he was quoting Vishnu.
Exactly. So again, that circles all the way back to the very essence, the very beginnings of humanity in the Rig Veda. And here we are in modern times still quoting it.
Well, and it's still real.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Marianne.
Well, so it sounds like what we've kind of narrowed this, or this is kind of leaning towards, is human beings have power and control, and we can purposefully destroy things, and by thinking about it, and you say we change the future, but maybe we only think we change the future. Maybe we're directing into a future that is inevitable. But human beings have the ability to grapple with that and to argue about that and to choose the way that we see the world. Where I think we talked before about when you have something concrete and in front of you, that's what it is. But if you can imagine it as something else, maybe that's the whole defining line, is that, we can imagine.
Well, let me swing back to Jung. One of the things that Jung said was that we're not in control. It's the symbols that are controlling us. And the goal of us as a human being is to cleanse our self of the controlling aspects of the symbols that we don't know are controlling us.
And that was a point, I want to say I've been laughing about this nuclear stuff, but I don't want to cry, so I laugh because it's that real. And Bob, you took the words right out of my mouth. What happens is we get the ball rolling. We have certain feelings and thoughts, and we put them into the politics, we put them into the ideology, and it gets moving. And then we go, oh, well, we don't want to do that, but the thing is already moving. It's already got a gravity of its own that's bringing other people into it, that's creating this. And that's what's happening on the world scene and in the national scene in America. These dark ideologies have heavy gravity, they're very loud, and they're drawing people to them. So this is another aspect of what makes us human. And boy, that's the part that really is hard. And I just want to end this before we get our final comments. Humility, humor, all have the root humus, which means of the earth. We, no matter how much we build on nature, we are still her. We are another iteration within the great round. So, having said all that, Marianne, final comments?
I think we were just talking about cause and effect, that once something gets put into motion, that it's going to happen. So it's funny because my shirt today is imagined, and it's I think what we can imagine is going to create our future. And so I think being a human being is coming to terms with, we do have control. We do have some control over our thoughts, over what we envision, over what we want to happen. But there is that cause and effect, and we're dealing with a lot of other people that may conflict with that. So I think for being a human being, we're just stumbling our way through it.
Amen.
That's it. Yeah.
Bob, final comments?
I'm not sure we have as much control as Marianne thinks we do. But I think that the thing we do have control over is once we realize that there are forces operating on us that we don't control, we can start beginning to look into ourselves and look at those forces and try and get a handle on them before we imagine what we want to do. Because if we don't do that, then what we're imagining is infected with our own pain and our own suffering that we then pass on.
Yeah, that suffering thing, man, oh man. I think that's a metric the human family needs to really make clear, so we have a suffering quotient and have an understanding in every heart of what that is. Now, where do we go from here? I'll be honest. I can't tell you what enlightenment is, but I can talk about the road to enlightenment. And one thing I've learned is the road to enlightenment is learning to see past the way you're looking at things. That means changing, man. That means changing all the time. You know, where would we be if we never changed our minds? Think about that. It's an amazing event to be able to turn. You know, there are points in my life where I had to wake up and just say, I'm just being lazy. I was making excuses for everything. I was letting Edie go places without me, all this stuff. And all of a sudden I said, you know, I'm just being lazy. I'm just making excuses. And when I started doing stuff that was different, that was outside my box, and believe me, Edie takes me outside my box, whole new world started. My imagination started entertaining things in a new way. I started redefining some relationships. And you know what? That's the road to enlightenment. I'm pretty set in my ways, and yet, right now, I'm changing my mind all over the place because I know that there is no enlightenment without it. My friends, be at peace and know that the oneness of love is all over the place. Peace.